We can't talk about the Blues Brothers, as we've touched on before, without talking about John Belushi.
Oh, yeah.
I know it's a difficult subject.
No, not now. I still love him and remember him every day.
Fair to say that it took you a long time to get over his death?
It did. It took a couple of years. We were, he was 33, I was 29.
Don Aykroyd never got to say goodbye to John Belushi, and what he's carried ever since is heavier than fame, laughter, or time itself. Dan Aykroyd has never forgotten John Belushi, and the pain of that loss is something he carries every single day. John was more than a friend. He was a brother in chaos and laughter, a partner in creativity who shared every risk, every joke, and every wild idea that shaped their world. From the earliest days, when they were both hungry performers, eager to make people laugh and push boundaries, their connection was immediate and electric. John Belushi had this energy that could fill a room before he even spoke, while Dan had a focus that balanced the storm, a precision in timing and observation. That made their comedy explosive and unforgettable. Together, they were unstoppable, a perfect storm of talent, humor, and daring. Losing him was like losing the center of gravity in Dan's life. The grief did not fade. It lingered, a shadow that never left. Dan has often said that John's death was not a moment but a rupture, a fracture that changed the trajectory of everything he did afterward. When Don reflects on those days, he remembers laughter first, the kind of laughter that makes your chest hurt and tears fill your eyes. They were wild, reckless, fearless, and their friendship was the heart of that fearlessness. They shared jokes, skits, and characters that became legendary, but behind the curtain, there was a bond that went deeper than fame or applause. Dan remembers walking into a room and seeing John's grin and feeling that the world was exactly as it should be. That sense of alignment disappeared the day John died. Dan has described the silence that followed as deafening. It was not just the absence of sound, it was the absence of a presence that defined him, that made life vibrant and unpredictable. The world suddenly felt smaller, less colorful, and every accomplishment afterward carried a bittersweet edge, because John was not there to witness it. The aftermath of losing John Belushi forced Dan to confront things he had never faced before. He was no stranger to hard work, success, and the pressures of fame, but grief has a way of unraveling even the strongest foundations. Dan has shared how he felt an overwhelming mix of guilt and helplessness, questioning if he could have done more to save his friend. At the time, they were surrounded by a culture that glamorized excess and overlooked warning signs, and looking back, Dan wrestles with whether he could have intervened differently, said more, insisted harder. That regret became a constant companion, whispering in quiet moments, reminding him that some losses cannot be prevented. No matter how much you love someone, the complexity of these emotions stayed with him, shaping how he viewed life, friendship, and responsibility in ways that fame never could. Dan has described nights when he would replay memories, both joyful and painful, trying to reconcile what happened. He remembers the early years when everything felt possible, the rush of creativity, the sense of being invincible. Those memories are both comforting and cruel. Comforting because they remind him of the extraordinary bond they shared, and cruel because they underline the fragility of life and how abruptly it can end. Grief is not linear, and Don has said that some days he feels it acutely, a raw, aching weight, while other days it is quieter, a steady hum in the background that informs every choice and every moment. John's presence, even in absence, continues to influence him. The personal impact of this loss also extended into Dan's career. Comedy, which once felt limitless, suddenly carried a heavier weight. The reckless, freewheeling energy of his early work was tempered by an awareness of fragility, mortality, and the consequences of ignoring danger. Dan has openly admitted that for a long time he struggled to perform without thinking of John, without filling the gap where his friend's energy should have been. He learned to find ways to honor John through his work, keeping the spontaneity and brilliance alive while also holding a space for the reality of loss. That balance was delicate and often painful, but it became a form of tribute, a way to continue their story. Even years later, Dan Aykroyd encounters reminders of John Belushi in the most ordinary moments. A laugh that echoes a rhythm in performance, a line that sparks memory, each triggers a wave of nostalgia and sorrow. Don has described these moments as bittersweet, a mixture of gratitude for having known someone so extraordinary and grief for the years that were stolen too soon. He has said that living with this grief is not about overcoming it, but learning to coexist with it, allowing it to shape his perspective while continuing to engage with the world. John's absence is a constant companion, but it is also a reminder of the depth of their friendship and the brilliance he brought into the world. Dan Aykroyd has reflected on the larger lessons John's life and death taught him. Fame does not protect anyone. Talent is no shield from personal demons. Love and friendship, while powerful, sometimes cannot prevent tragedy. These realizations forced him to approach life with a new awareness, to appreciate relationships, and to value the fragility of joy. Comedy remained his lifeblood, but it became infused with a recognition of mortality, a respect for the fleeting nature of connection, and an appreciation for the moments that matter most. John Belushi's memory shaped not just the man Dan became, but the work he continued to create. At the heart of all this, Dan has spoken about love and loyalty. The grief is profound, but so is the gratitude. Knowing John Belushi, sharing the stage, sharing life, is something that cannot be quantified. The loss is permanent, but the love and the influence remain alive in every joke, every performance, and every memory Dan carries. He has said that he would not trade the friendship for anything, even knowing the heartbreak it would eventually bring. That paradox of joy and pain, love and loss, defines the depth of their connection, and it is a story that continues to resonate. Reminding the world of the brilliance of John Belushi and the bond they share continues to carry the weight of John Belushi's absence with him every day. The grief did not simply fade. It transformed into something that became a lens through which he views life, work, and friendship. Every choice he makes, every moment of creativity, is subtly informed by the memory of John. He has often said that the pain is inseparable from the love they shared. It is not a burden in the sense of limitation, but rather a reminder of the extraordinary connection they once had, and the consequences of losing someone who was both a mirror and a partner in every sense. The experience taught him that deep bonds leave permanent marks on the soul, marks that do not vanish with time. After John's death, Dan found himself reevaluating the culture of comedy and entertainment around them. He realized how excess and recklessness were often glamorized while the warnings were ignored. John Belushi was a figure who gave everything he had, pushing every boundary. But the support system to protect him was lacking. Dan has admitted that looking back, he wished the industry, and sometimes even himself, had done more to recognize the danger signs. This acknowledgement did not come from judgment but from a profound awareness of how fragile life and success can be. It made him more attentive, more protective, and more conscious of the responsibilities that come with friendship and fame. Dan Aykroyd's reflections on John also shaped his own approach to collaboration. He learned that the chemistry they shared was rare, almost impossible to replicate. The energy, spontaneity, and trust they had was unique to their friendship. After John's passing, Dan became more thoughtful about creative partnerships, more intentional about the people he allowed close in his work. He never tried to replace John or recreate the magic. Instead, he sought to honor it by respecting its uniqueness. That lesson stayed with him, teaching him that some connections are once in a lifetime, and their value is immeasurable, especially when they are lost too soon. Even decades later, Don talks about John with a mix of reverence and sorrow. He recalls John's generosity, his laughter, his unpredictability, and the way he could light up a room in seconds. Those memories are not sanitized. They are raw and real. Dan does not shy away from acknowledging John's struggles, alongside his brilliance, because he understands that truth is essential to preserving a legacy. The person John was, with all his flaws and triumphs, continues to inspire Don to approach life boldly, humorously, and authentically. That inspiration is bittersweet, a combination of joy for having known him and sorrow for the years that will never exist. Dan Aykroyd has said that grief became a source of purpose. The tragedy forced him to become more aware of the dangers of addiction, the importance of looking out for friends, and the responsibility that comes with influence. He did not approach this as a lecture to others, but as a reflection of lived experience. John Belushi's death served as a stark warning, and Don has used that awareness to guide his own choices and, when possible, protect others. It became a mission to honor John's life, not just in memory, but in action. By trying to prevent similar pain for those still living, Dan also confronts the what-ifs. Imagining what could have been if John had lived. He wonders about projects they never made, experiences they never shared, and the laughter that was abruptly stolen. These thoughts are both comforting and devastating. Comforting because they remind him of the extraordinary partnership they had and the impact John made in his life. Devastating because they underline how abruptly brilliance can be lost, and how fragile life is despite talent, ambition, and love. Dan has learned to live with these thoughts without letting them consume him, using them instead to motivate, inspire, and honor his friend's legacy. The lesson Don has carried most profoundly is that grief is inseparable from love. Losing someone as central as John Belushi is unbearable, yet it is the proof of how deep and transformative that bond was. Dan has said that he would rather endure the pain of loss than live in a world where that friendship never existed. This paradox of joy and heartbreak shapes every memory, every performance, and every decision he makes. The grief is not a burden to escape, but a testament to the magnitude of what was shared, a permanent echo of laughter, creativity, and trust. Don also notes that John's influence is evident in his own approach to life. The courage to take risks, the refusal to settle for mediocrity, and the relentless pursuit of authenticity all stem from his time with John. Even after all these years, the energy they shared continues to inspire him to be bold in comedy, work, and life. John taught him not just to perform, but to live fully, unapologetically, and with integrity. Losing John, while devastating, reinforced these lessons, making them more meaningful because they were intertwined with love and loss. Every time Dan recounts stories about John, he speaks with a careful balance of admiration and melancholy. He remembers pranks, wild performances, and moments of profound vulnerability that most people never saw. These memories are kept alive, not for nostalgia, but for their power to illuminate the man. John was brilliant, flawed, generous, fearless, and deeply human. Don believes that sharing these truths is an act of preservation. It ensures that John's impact remains authentic, not mythologized or idealized, but real and inspiring. Grief, according to Dan, is a constant companion that shapes who you are and how you live. John Belushi's absence is not something that diminishes over time. It evolves, shifting from raw shock to a reflective presence that informs every relationship, every creative decision, and every moment of introspection. Dan has learned that honoring someone means carrying both the joy of their life and the sorrow of their absence together. It is a delicate balance that requires courage, honesty, and a commitment to remembering fully. Dan Aykroyd speaks about John Belushi, not to reopen wounds, but to shine a light on the complexity of human experience. Fame does not protect anyone. Talent does not make someone immortal, and love does not always prevent tragedy. The story of John and Dan is a reminder that friendship, brilliance, and vulnerability coexist, and that their loss leaves lasting marks that shape the survivor's life. By telling this story honestly, Don keeps John alive, in memory, influence, and inspiration, proving that the bond they shared transcends time, space, and circumstance.